This might just be my favorite episode of Red Table Talk of all time. So many gems were dropped, and I'm going to share with you my top 6. Hi, I'm Selena, and welcome to Selena's Musings. This is where I like to share my thoughts, ideas, perceptions, and things that inspire me. Today, I am joined by Cairo. He has decided that he wants to chill with me over here, so please excuse him if he gets in the way. With that said, let's jump into it. All right, y'all, before I hop into it with my 6 gems from this week's episode of Red Table Talk, I want to provide a quick overview of what the episode was about. So the title of this week's episode of Red Table Talk was called The Narcissism Epidemic. And I think that's so aptly titled because narcissism is really kind of reaching epidemic proportions in our society. Now, if you're not familiar with what narcissism is, I think that it can perhaps best be understood by hearing the story of where the name came from. So in Greek mythology, there was a character, and I can't remember if he was a mortal or a nymph. I think he may have been a nymph. And if you're not up on Greek mythology, just Google it. You can hear the story told much better. But here's my quick little rundown. So this character's name was Narcissus. And Narcissus was a beautiful man. He was really regarded for his handsome looks. And one day he was traveling and happened upon a lake. And it was a really still lake. So he could see his reflection perfectly. It was like almost like a mirror. And he fell in love with his own reflection. And in falling in love with his own reflection, he kept getting drawn towards it. And mind you, this is water, right? And he actually drowned. And so when we think about narcissism, it's a level of self-absorption that is so high that you can get lost in it. Now, the guest on this episode of Red Table Talk is a renowned expert who I have learned so much from. I've actually shared the link to her YouTube channel in past videos because, y'all, if you have not checked out her channel, you must. Her name is Dr. Ramani, and she is an expert on narcissism. She has several books on the topic and a plethora of really, really great and helpful YouTube videos on the subject. I will be including the link to her channel down below. Definitely check it out. And definitely check out the episode of this week's Red Table Talk. It's available on their Facebook. If you don't have Facebook, like, it's so good, y'all. Like, borrow your cousin, your auntie, log in, whoever. Like, get you somebody's access if you don't have one so you can watch it. All 30 minutes are well worthwhile. So watch the episode. With that said, here are kind of my top 6 gems that I took away from it. All right, so gem number 1. Almost everybody has narcissistic traits, but not everyone has narcissistic personality disorder. I think that one of the things that was really dope was how honest Jada was about the fact that she has some narcissistic traits. And, you know, she talked about how the entertainment industry in particular is really rife with narcissism. You almost have to have like a pretty strong streak of narcissism in order to thrive in that industry. And if you don't come into it with those traits, you're bound to develop them over time because celebrity really inherently involves people just kind of bigging you up, right? I talked about this on my last video where we talked about putting people on a pedestal. Celebrities are constantly put on a pedestal, and they're constantly kind of made to be superhuman by a lot of people. So it can be really hard to stay grounded and not develop a lot of narcissistic traits. With that said, pretty much everyone, including myself, has some level of narcissistic traits, right? Some level of self-absorption or, vanity or whatever, right? None of us are perfect, but it doesn't reach the level of narcissistic personality disorder where you're an actual narcissist until you meet like a certain criteria. This is actually a diagnosed mental illness, personality disorder, which is a little different than mental illness. And Dr. Ramani does talk about that in some of her content. So it is an actual diagnosable personality disorder. You have to reach a certain criteria, and it has to actually interfere with your ability to function in a healthy way. So gem number one, again, is that there is a difference between having narcissistic traits and narcissistic personality disorder. To that end, one should really avoid trying to diagnose folks if you're not a professional. If you see people with these traits, take heed, pay attention to red flags, but kind of be careful about trying to throw that actual diagnosis on people or yourself when you're not really an expert. Read up on it, learn about it. And if you're really, really quite sure that there's somebody in your life with narcissistic personality disorder, based on the actual, professional criteria, proceed with caution, but do not try to diagnose them to them. That can be a disaster. And actually, again, Dr. Ramani talks about that a little bit in this episode and other videos that she does. Gem number two, narcissists are not born, they're made. So again, Dr. Ramani touched on this a bit in this video, and she's talked about it in others as well. It's really sad, and I think it's one of the reasons why people who identify as empaths, people who are very compassionate and loving and forgiving, tend to get caught up with narcissists a lot, because you can really see how their childhood and things that they experienced during their development phase contributed to them being a narcissist. One of the things about narcissists is that they come off as being really grandiose and feeling really great about themselves and thinking that they're the next best thing to, well, not next best, they just the best, okay? It seems that way, but really what it is that they have overblown their ego, because deep inside, they feel very, very insecure, very, very hollow. And narcissists are typically kind of made by one of two extremes. So oftentimes they either have parents or primary caregivers who make them feel really, really bad about themselves, really diminish them, really talk down to them, are really abusive towards them. And so they kind of develop this grandiose vision of themselves, this mask, this facade to cover up how bad they feel about themselves. Or conversely, they may have parents or primary caregivers who put them on that pedestal I talked about last time and create kind of a superhuman status for them. And what happens, and the reasons why that is so unhealthy for children, is that because they can't really live up to that really, really high superhuman standard their parents have set for them, they feel like a fraud. And they feel like their true self, their flawed self, isn't good enough. And so they kind of develop self-hate for who they really are, because their parent can't see them for who they really are. Their parent has developed this idealized image of them, and it really can mess them up. So again, gem number two, narcissists aren't born, they're made. Gem number three, narcissists do not just target the weak or the broken. So oftentimes, we believe that narcissists only prey on people who are weak-willed or, broken in some way, came from a broken home, that sort of thing. And that's just not the case, right? Narcissists, particularly certain types of narcissists, and we'll get into that in a minute, are really, really master manipulators. And because they have this grandiose sense of self at the kind of shallow ego level, they really want to be associated with the best and the brightest. So while they may sometimes prey on people who are more vulnerable to get what we call narcissistic supply, which is the kind of endless admiration they feel that they need, they will also target people who will bring any sort of kind of accolades to the table, because they want to be associated with great things, including great people. So if you're a highly accomplished, confident person, don't think that a narcissist won't try to come for you, because they are drawn towards great, elite things. And so if they see you as being great and magnificent and elite, they will try to associate themselves with you so that by proxy, they can kind of get some of that clout that you got, right? So don't think that because you're not a vulnerable person, narcissists won't try to manipulate you. This was a really important point that Dr. Ramani brought up, because Willow really shared and was vulnerable in sharing her experience with really being probably overly permissive or overly chill with people who are really crossing boundaries. And that's one sign that somebody might be either narcissistic or highly manipulative. They're really, really disrespectful to your boundaries. And, you know, Willow comes from a great loving family, great stable home, wealthy family, lots of resources and support. But just because she's not from a broken home, it does not mean that she cannot be manipulated by people who have this malignant tendency. So once again, gem number 3, narcissists do not just target the weak or the broken. Gem number 4. A lot of narcissists do not seem like jerks. Now, oftentimes when we watch movies or shows and they're depicting somebody who's really narcissistic, they come off really jerky and, you know, a lot of people don't like them. They seem like they're just kind of a show off. But a lot of narcissists are slicker than that, right? Dr. Ramani introduced a term that I never heard before that made so much sense to me. The noble narcissist. What is a noble narcissist? A noble narcissist is someone who seems like such a great altruistic person in public and with people who they either have shallow or infrequent interaction with, but with those who they have long-term and frequent interactions with, like their family members, their spouses, those sort of folks, they are terrors, okay? So these are the folks who are out there, you know, maybe preaching at the pulpit, running nonprofits, principals of schools, you know, doing all these great things, feeding the homeless, whatever. But they're not doing it for genuine reasons. They're not doing it because they genuinely care about homeless people or they genuinely care about the gospel. They're doing it for attention, for accolades, for applause. Now, that's not to say that all of us aren't subject to wanting to be appreciated for our good deeds, right? Wanting to be appreciated for your good deeds does not make you a full-blown narcissist. But if that is the only thing motivating you, and if you act very differently towards your spouse or towards your family, that is a very big clue that something's off. And I tell people this a lot. You have to pay attention to how people behave when it's one-on-one, when you don't have anything to offer, and over longer periods of time. Narcissists are very good at being charismatic, at showing grand gestures. During the courting phase, when they're in romantic relationships, they are like Prince Charming or, you know, Princess Diana. They are everything you could dream of for a partner. It's over time, once that dating phase have worn off, that you feel like you're dealing with an entirely different human being. The same happens a lot with narcissists who are your supervisor or your boss. In the beginning, they seem amazing. And then over time, you start to see that mask slip and it's like a terror, right? And, you know, that is why I think a lot of times folks are just shocked when things will come out about pastors who've been, you know, regarded by their community for decades. And then you find out they've been doing these wild things to people under their ministry or to their wives or husbands or whatever, right? Or, you know, we see this with politicians. Like, people will be like, I would have never imagined they were such a nice person. That is one of the tools of the narcissist. So beware of the noble or covert narcissist. They're out there and they are not easy to spot until they feel like they've got you trapped. Gem number 5. Narcissists cannot be cured. Now, this is a tough one because I know that, you know, we always want to believe that people can change for the better. And, you know, the reality is that narcissists can make progress. They can make some improvements, but it's pretty much impossible for them to be fully cured, if you will. One of the marks of having narcissistic personality disorder is a lack of empathy. They're really not able to experience or understand with any sort of empathy what other people are going through emotionally. And Dr. Ramani talks about how a lot of her patients have narcissistic personality disorder, and she may be able to get them to a little bit of a higher level of functionality, but they can never get to the point where they're fully empathetic, where they're fully functional in having healthy relationships with other people. And there's a few reasons for that. One of the marks of narcissism, in addition to lacking empathy, is they tend to lack real self-awareness. If you don't have real self-awareness, you're not really able to fix what you're not aware of. Now, working with a therapist, our specialists can help with that because they can help raise certain things to your level of awareness. But because people with narcissistic personality disorder are also highly sensitive and fragile in their sense of self, they tend to be so defensive that they're only so open to the kind of feedback and insight one needs when they lack self-awareness. The other issue is that narcissists are generally rewarded for their behavior by society. I know that sounds crazy, but again, because narcissists are really good at being charismatic and seeming like a great catch to the general public, they're able to take advantage of that. A lot of folks who are, top executives, some of your favorite entertainers, even some of the pastors or imams or, spiritual leaders, nonprofit leaders, whatever that you respect the most, like not all of them, but some of them have narcissistic personality disorder, and you would never know unless you're in a close relationship with them. And so because society rewards their behavior in a lot of ways, they're not incentivized to change. Why would you change if it's working for you, right? And because they lack empathy, they don't really feel hurt when they hurt other people. So that's not an incentive to change either, right? Like if somebody who doesn't have narcissistic personality disorder sees that they hurt somebody that they love, then they're going to be incentivized to change because they don't want to hurt their loved ones. But because narcissists are not able to really feel that hurt, they don't identify with that, right? They don't feel incentivized to change because they've hurt people. They just discard them. And that's an unfortunate reality. So again, gem number 5, unfortunately, narcissists cannot be cured, but they can be treated. And gem number 6, forgiveness is a weapon that they'll use against you. Now, this is also a tough one. I'm not saying, and I don't think Dr. Ramani is saying that you shouldn't forgive narcissists, but you should keep that to yourself, right? Forgiveness is for you. So if you choose to forgive a narcissist, do that for yourself and keep it to yourself, because a narcissist will use that to hoover you in. Hoovering is a terminology, or a term rather, that is used widely when folks are talking about narcissists, because it's a technique that they use to suck people back in, right? So if they know that you forgive them, they're going to slowly but surely manipulate you back in, right? And so the best thing to do is to forgive them for yourself, heal within yourself, but keep an absolute distance. There's a technique that professionals use called gray rocking. And to gray rock is to just kind of become silent, bland, do not give them any emotion or energy, because if they're seeing that you're giving them any sort of emotion or energy, whether it be on the positive or negative end of the spectrum, they're going to feed off of that and they're going to loop you back in. So the best thing to do is to just act indifferent. Even if you don't feel indifferent, you better act that way with them. Keep the forgiveness to yourself, for yourself, and do not share it with the narcissist, because they will use it against you. All right, y'all. So those were my top 6 takeaways from this week's episode of the Red Table Talk on the Narcissism Epidemic. Again, cannot recommend enough that you take some time to watch, listen, and learn. I would love to hear your comments below. What are some of the things that you took away from this talk? What are your experiences dealing with narcissists or narcissism? And what are some things that you would like to learn more about narcissism? Leave your comments down below, and thank you. Y'all are my muses. You inspire me to come on here and share my thoughts, and I appreciate y'all. Have a good one.